Hello, and welcome to another episode of Crizzy Books. I'm Crizzy, or Criz, but only my homeboys call me Criz. The end of the year is fast approaching, and that means it's list time for me. I already did my list of DNFs and the worst books that I read this year, so if you're interested in seeing that, go check it out. A couple of stinkers on there. But now I want to get into the things that I actually really liked this year. So today I want to go through all of the books that I read this year that I gave 5 stars to. I'm just going to go through these chronologically, starting with the first one that I gave 5 stars to, all the way to the last one I gave 5 stars to. But before we get into that, let me give some context on how I rate books and what a 5-star means. Every book that is on this list I think is perfect. I don't think that there's anything wrong with them. However, that doesn't mean that these were my favorite books of the year. These were all just books that I thought are perfect. I can find no complaint with anything that's here. But this is not my top 10 favorites of the year. There are several things on here that probably will not make that list. These are all books that I would absolutely recommend to pretty much anybody and say, I dare you to find a flaw with it, really. Which may be controversial for some of these. But for me, I think that these are all perfect books from start to finish. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's actually get into this list. At number 8, in January, the second book that I read this year, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Prior to this, in terms of horror books and things that I've read that are scary, not a whole lot. I wanted to broaden my horizons in that genre this year. I started off reading several different horror books at the beginning of the year, and I loved this. It was unlike anything that I had read before. A very psychological horror, this sense of creeping dread, not really understanding what's going on. People's actions seem off. I just thought that this was great. It had my attention throughout. I was fully invested in it, and I just thought that it was perfect. If you're into more psychologically influenced horror, absolutely check this one out. The second book that I gave 5 stars to this year is actually a nonfiction book, which I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but this one just hit really close to home for me. And that's I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I love this. I don't normally read nonfiction because a lot of the time I feel like the authors are just putting unnecessary details into it, trying to pad the book and make it longer, and they spend a lot of time not getting to the point. This one does the exact opposite of that. If every nonfiction book was written like this, I would read nonfiction consistently. I think that her writing is fantastic, and like I said, her personal story, I related a lot to the things that she was saying and she was experiencing. Undeniable 5 stars for me. The third book that I gave 5 stars to, Tender is the Flesh. I'm going to try and keep this whole thing like spoiler free. This is a future where people are okay with doing something. Eating people is legal. That's the premise. And that's not really a spoiler. It's like kind of what the basis of the entire book. That idea and what our main character does with it and how other people act and the culture surrounding it is just so scary because it feels real. This is really unnerving, very unsettling. Disturbing for sure. Really good, and I thought that the ending was just great. If you're definitely looking for a horror novel that's a little more on the messed up side, look no further. The fourth book that I gave 5 stars to is No One Is Talking About This. Do you want to be in this one too? Well, come here. What do you got to say? Okay. This book was surprisingly great. Very straightforward, pretty short. I thought that it approached modern culture, especially like online culture and meme culture, and just the feeling that most people overwhelmingly feel in our current society. I think that it handles all of those things really well, really beautifully. And then the book kind of shifts around the middle, and it just becomes so heartfelt and raw and very emotional and purposeful. And I just think that this is just a fantastic book. I would highly recommend that anybody read this because in terms of genre, this is just a kind of slice of life thing. Especially if you're like millennial Gen Z, I think this will really hit home for you, being that, you know, we are so familiar with the internet. I would highly recommend reading this. The fifth book that I gave 5 stars to is The Long Walk by Stephen King. I'm a huge Stephen King fan. If you've been watching my channel for the past year, you probably can figure that out. But there's still so much of his that I haven't read, and The Long Walk is one that I've had my eyes on for a long time that I finally got to. I actually read a lot of Richard Bachman books like this year and last year. Out of all the Stephen King that I read this year, this was by far the best. His character work, which he's so well known for, is very present here. This story is super interesting. If you're unfamiliar with what it's about, not really spoiling anything, it's literally in the title. This is a kind of dystopian future where there is a annual competition where young boys, young men, walk a long walk, and they all walk until one of them is left standing. Quite literally, if you stop walking, you die. It's great. I really cared about a lot of the characters in this. The ending was very good, and it's just brutal and introspective, and yeah. Awesome. One of the better Stephen King books I've read, for sure. The sixth book that I gave 5 stars to is The Call of the Wild. Ow! I did not expect to end up loving this as much as I did. This is the story of a dog who becomes a sled dog in the Yukon Territory. It connected with me on so many different levels. I am never going to say that it's like, hey, this is a book for the boys. This is a book for the fellas. But as a fella, I felt that a lot of the themes and a lot of what was going on in this really connected with me. And that could also have to do with, you know, my life and my experiences. But I really, really liked this. It has so much to do with strength and will and hierarchies and fighting. Getting into fights, trust, and learning about yourself and what you're capable of, and all those things. And I just think it's so good. I love this. Out of classic literature, this is definitely up there, probably in the top 10, top 5 probably. The 7th book that I gave 5 stars, Rosemary's Baby. What a banger! Oh my God, I loved this so much. If you're unfamiliar with Rosemary's Baby, I'm aware of it because I've seen the movie probably like most people have, not realizing that there was a book to this, and also incorrectly assuming that the book would not be as good as the movie. It is great, better, easily, even though they're pretty much exactly the same. I loved this. It's one of those books that I was kind of upset that I actually knew the story going into it, because I think that it would have been even better and more effective not knowing what the hell is going on in this. But even then, the story grabbed me. All of the subtle things that are happening throughout it, and the ending is one of the best endings I have ever read, ever in my life. I love the way this ends. It's great. This was so good. If I could give it 6 stars, I would. Well, you can. Shut up. If you are a fan of horror, absolutely read Rosemary's Baby. It's no question you should. The 8th book that I gave 5 stars to. This is a recent one. I just finished it, and I haven't even done a review for it yet. So here you go. If you follow me on Goodreads or Fable, you probably already know what I gave this. But if you follow me only on YouTube, you don't know that I gave this book 5 stars. It's Lonesome Dove. This is I don't know how many pages are in this thing, 800, 1,000, I'm not sure. It's huge and it's long, and it took me about a month to get through. but it was great. It was so good. Very character driven. Pretty much entirely character driven. About two old retired Texas Rangers who run their own stable and then decide that they are going to go on a cattle drive up to Montana, which is pretty untamed, and they want to be the first cattle ranchers up there. So that's what they do. And a lot of stuff happens on that drive. And you encounter so many different characters and so many different situations, and you really, the core of this book is really about the characters, and you fall in love with them, that by the end of it, you feel like you know these people. It's definitely one of the best Westerns that I've ever read. One of the best books I've ever read for sure. Yeah, it was just, there was no question at the end of it. This was a five-star book. So, love that one. Hey, Future Chris here. So after I finished recording this, I finished a book that I also gave 5 stars. So I better hop in here and at least give that one its flowers. This will probably be the last one, although who knows, but I think I'm probably going to slow down on the reading for the rest of the year. So I would expect this to probably be the last 5-star one that I read this year. Hopefully, because I'm not going to go back and edit more of this. It is a man called Ove. Uwe? It's Ove. I called him Ove the whole book, so it's Ove for me. When I finished it, I wouldn't say that I was totally in love with the book. I don't think that I'm going to walk around and be like, oh my God, it was amazing. But when I kept thinking about like, well, how would I rate this book and what did I really think about it? I couldn't find anything wrong with it. I think it really is a perfect story. It's written really well. It's funny. It's very unflinching and honest and realistic in the way people feel internally about what's going on in their lives. I think it does a great job of portraying depression and anger and the ways in which outside forces and things that are outside of our control affect our lives, and how we sometimes feel very powerless, and how that can just lead to a lot of internalized anger. Even if you aren't really yourself an angry or mean person, you can come across that way. And it also is really great with age and with death and friendship. I just thought that this was a really, really good, solid slice of life book. That again, another one on this list that, like, I would recommend this one to pretty much anybody. It's sad, it's happy, it's everything in between. Yeah. Okay, bye. So there you have it. 9 books. I had 9 5-star bangers this year. These are all of the ones that I thought were perfection on paper. Again, that does not mean that these are all of the books that are going to be on my top 10. These aren't like my top absolute favorite books of the year. Some of them are. Some of them aren't. There are books that I read this year that I love way more than some of the stuff that's on here, which sounds weird, but not really. But how about you? What were your 5-star bangers this year? Let me know in the comments. Be on the lookout for my next however many lists I end up doing. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and as always, thank you for watching. Goodbye. Mwah.